Okay, so now what we want to do, like I said before we ended the previous video, is to add these sleeves. Okay, so the way we're going to start doing that is first by creating a new CSS rule, and we want to target the sleeve. So let me open the HTML file and you're going to see what I'm talking about. So inside the first marker, the red marker, we've created a new div element, and we've given this new div element a class with a value of sleeve. So we want to target this class here, and the way we do that is to use the dot notation. So we write dot, and then we write the name of the class. In this case, the name of the class is sleeve. So we bring our curly braces, and then we want to set the width property to 110 pixels, and we also want to set the height property to 25 pixels. All right, to make the marker look more realistic, give the sleeve a transparent white color. First, set the sleeve element background color to white. So we want to set the background color to white. Okay, now as you can see, we have this white that is covering part of the red marker. Okay. So now let's look at something called opacity, which describes how transparent or non-transparent something is. So for example, a solid wall is opaque because no light can pass through it, and you can also not see through it. But something like a glass is transparent because light can pass through it, which also means you can see through it. So now with the white that we have here, we cannot see through it. That's why it looks almost as if the red marker has disappeared from beneath it. It is still there, but it's because the white is covering it. That is why we cannot see it. So what we want to do is to reduce the opacity or transparency of the white so that we can see the red beneath it. Okay. The way we do that is to use a property in CSS called the opacity property. And using that property, you can control how opaque or transparent a value is. So with a value of 0 or 0%, the element will be completely transparent. And with a value of 1 or 100%, the element will be completely opaque. So that's the extreme ends of the opacity property. So we have 0 or 0% on one hand, where the element is completely transparent, and we have 1 or 100% on the other hand, where the element is completely opaque. So in the CSS rule which we have here, we want to set the opacity to 0.5, which is like 50% transparent. So we say 0.5. And as you can see now, we can see the red marker that the white marker is covering. Okay, instead of 0.5, you can also use 50%, and it works the same way. But let's just stick to 0.5. Okay, so another way to set the opacity for an element is with what we call the alpha channel. So using the alpha channel, you can control how transparent or opaque a color is. Okay, so you've already set sleeves opacity with a named color and the opacity property, but you can also add an alpha channel to the CSS color property. So inside the sleeve, you want to remove the opacity property and value. So first, let's remove this. and then we'll see another way of adding the opacity. In this way, we'll be using the color code. So for our RGB color, we'll add an extra argument, which will be an A. So A stands for alpha. So instead of RGB, we will have rgba. Okay, so in this case, the R will still stand for the red value, G will still stand for green value, B will stand for blue value, and then A will stand for the alpha value or the opacity. Okay, and we can do the same for the HSL and hex as well. We'll see how to do that later on. But for now, let's see how we can do that in the RGBA. So in the sleeve, we want to set the background color property to pure white with a 50% opacity. So the way we do that is to first clean this white color here. Then we use RGBA. Instead of RGB, this time we are using RGBA because we want to add a value for the transparency. So to get the color white, all of the colors has to be at their full intensity. So for red, we will need 255. For green, we will still need 255. The same for blue, 255. And as you can see, we have a white color here. And then we'll give it a 50% opacity. Okay, and then we now have a white color on top of the red, but with a 50% opacity. For step 76, we can see that our sleeve is looking good, but it will look even better if it was positioned more toward the right side of the marker. Okay, as you can see here, the sleeve isn't on the left side, it's more towards the right side, somewhere in the middle. So to have that effect, the way we can do that is to add a new div within the class cap before the sleeve div element. Okay, so add a new div for the class cap before the sleeve element. So this is the sleeve element. Want to add a new div before it. So we have our opening div and our closing div tag. And this div, we want to give it a class with the value cap. Okay. All right, so now that we have, let me stretch this to the right so that we have enough room to work with. Okay, so now that we have this red marker here, inside it we have the first div with a class of cap, and we have another div with a class of sleeve. So for the sleeve, we have already styled it to have this transparent white color, and for the cap, we want to also style it as well. So the way we do that is to first target it. We do that by using the dot because it's a cap. It's a class, sorry, and then we write the name of the class, which in this case is cap. Bring your curly braces, and then we set the width property. Set the width property to 60 pixels, and then we want to set the height property to 25 pixels. All right. Okay, so it looks like your sleeve disappeared, but don't worry, it's still there. What actually happened is that your new cap div is taking up the entire width of the marker. Okay, so it's covering the whole place and it's pushing the sleeve down to the next line. This is because if you remember what we spoke about block elements and inline elements, the default display property for div elements is block because it's a block element. So when two block elements are next to each other, they actually stack like actual block, that is one on top of the other. For example, your marker elements are all stacked on top of each other. Okay, so one on top of the other. as opposed to one being next to the other. All right, so to position two elements on the same line, set their display properties to inline block. So the way we're going to do this, so there's the element div with a class of cap and div with a class of sleeve. So these elements are the one that is sitting one on top of the other, and want them to be side by side. So the way we do that is to create a new CSS rule that targets both of them. So to target the class with the cap value, we write dot cap like so, and then we bring our comma, and we also use dot sleeve. This means that every style that we add here will be affecting both the sleeve and the cap div. Right, so let's go ahead and do display, and we say inline block. Okay, now we see our sleeve is back and is shifted to the right side, much the same way as we have it here. Okay, in the last project you learned a bit about borders and border color property. Okay, so all HTML elements have borders, though they are usually set to none by default. With CSS, you can control all aspects of an element's border and set the border on all sides or just on one side at a time. So for a border to be visible, you need to set it width and styles. So the way we are going to do so is we want to add a border to the sleeve. Okay, the sleeve is this transparent white color we have here, so we want to add a border to it, and as you can see, there's a border to the left of it. So the way we can add that is to say border left width, and we just give it a value of 10 pixels. Okay, all right, borders have several styles to choose from. You can make your border a solid line, but you can also use the dashboard or dotted line if you prefer. Solid border lines are probably the most common. Okay, so in the div CSS rule, in the in the dot sleeve CSS rule, we want to add a border left style with a value of solid. Okay, so we say border left style, and we give it a value of solid. Okay, so now we have this solid border here. We can also give it a value of dotted if you wanted. Now, as you can see, when we use dotted, we have this little dots here, but let's switch back to solid. Okay, so that will be it for this one, and we will continue in the next one. So thanks for watching this one, and see you in the next one.